Well, good morning. And it's raining outside and it's cold. So the dog's been walked and I managed to get in and out before the rain really started. Today I'm looking at ancient Egypt. Now, you may be wondering why a construction or architectural technologist should be looking at ancient Egypt. Well, the answer is very simple. Their construction techniques were different. There's a lot to be learned from the mistakes that they made to the advances that they made in general construction. It's a long story, and the myths precede the truth. Slaves weren't used, they were an organized, well paid, housed, and looked after workforce. They did move huge amounts of stone. Now, on the flat, I can easily see sledges, roller bearings, big logs, and the Nile or waterways to move the large stones around. How they got them up to the upper levels of the big pyramids and the big buildings is open to debate. I have my own ideas. I still think that there is room for ramparts to be looked at properly. I do think that the jacking system would be very interesting to look at to see whether they could actually lift them up that way. I tend to think so. On the other hand, looking at the way that the construction techniques were used, it's surprising that arches weren't more used. They were towards the later dynasties, in other words, at the end of the reign of Egypt. But early on, nothing. There were corbelled arches, in other words, layers of brickwork jutting out as you went up. And these were often cut to look like arches, but they weren't. They were corbelled. There was also raking, in other words, two stones laid upon each other and the inner surface cut so that it looked like an arch. But the actual use of stones laid as visures up around a formed unit, it was not often done. There were sort of complications of several very thin arches put together to form a master arch later on. But their understanding of arches didn't come in till probably the Romans. Also, the way that they used tools, it's quite possible that they understood how to level. And the use of water is probably the method. In fact, it is the method that they used. You can see on certain stones where the groove has been laid down the center where water must have been poured, and if it was level, then they could see it along the sides of the trough as it went down the center of the stone. A system that's used still today, if you go in and watch older ceiling installers who've not got electronic tools, they have what's called a water pipe with two glasses at the other end. One's fixed and the other one's the roaming end. And it's quite simple. The water found its level, and that's the level that they want to keep across the whole of the ceiling. Dead easy to use, far cheaper than having a piece of electronic equipment with batteries and all the other stuff you have to go through. So it is interesting to see how modern equipment has evolved from way back in time. So the article's there. Have a look at it, read through it, make your own notes, add it to your own workbook or your knowledge book. And it's probably something that you'll never ever use. But there's always a chance that you may one day be asked to go onto a dig and give advice on the way that the construction methods were done. Most of the evidence we've got comes from archaeologists who are not construction trained, and maybe they've got it wrong. A good technician or technologist on an archaeological dig is going to be somebody's job somewhere down the line. So I hope it's you. Anyway, have fun, read the book. Oh, by the way, this is the book that I've referenced. It's coming out backwards on here. So it's Summer and Clark's Ancient Egyptian Construction and Architecture. It's a well documented book and describes much of what I've been talking about here. I bought this on eBay. I think I paid about 12 quid for it. A bit expensive for normal books that I buy at about the 3.5, 4 quid mark, but it is a classic and I'm very pleased to have it. So have fun and read through and expand your knowledge base. Toodaloo.